Hello and welcome to the Love, Listen, Talk, Repeat podcast. I'm Wendy Capewell, your podcast host, as well as being a counsellor and psychotherapist, author, and speaker. In each of these podcast episodes, I'll be joined by various guests, sharing their expertise and experiences on different subjects. So, let's get on with this week's show.
I'd like to introduce David Pope today. He is a private coach, online course creator, and podcaster. A really interesting man. We've chatted before. We had long chats, which is quite nice because we're in the same kind of we work with similar types of people, I guess. So we have same kind of clients. So it's really interesting to talk about different things. But I'm going to hand over to David first of all to introduce himself, and then I think what we decided we're going to kind of address today was depression and anxiety. But before we start on that, David, would you like to introduce yourself and tell the audience more about you?
Sure. So I'm a private coach and counsellor. I specialise in bereavement, depression and anxiety. And essentially, I have struggled my whole life with depression and anxiety, probably since from about the age of 6, where I felt as though something wasn't quite right at that age. I started having very intense feelings of isolation, feeling like I was an outsider, like I didn't fit in, didn't have any friends. Although eventually, I'd always have one best friend kind of thing, whereas everyone else had, a big group of friends. And yeah, I think from that age onwards, it began a journey of struggle, which I still carry to this day. But it manifested in me having to find coping strategies to get me through my depression and my anxiety on a daily basis. And I always say that there is no cure for depression or anxiety. There's no magic wand that waves it away. But there are tools that can reduce it. Obviously, you have to dig deep to be able to get to the point where you can reduce those tools, because depression and anxiety is extremely overwhelming and all-consuming. So there are a lot of battles, internal battles. But in the end, I get to a point where I think, right, I've suffered and it's 1 o'clock now. So I want to try and make the most of the rest of my day. And that's where that determination to actually, reduce it, and employ a strategy that's going to reduce it, or strategies. Yeah, that's where I am. That's where I've come from in terms of my journey. Yeah.
That's given you a lot of your own personal experience to help others now, I guess, as well as, I don't know about you, but I also learn from my own personal experiences, but also from my clients. I think they teach me a lot.
Yes.
So I think there's quite a lot, isn't there? You think, I didn't realize that, or that person experiences that I hadn't realized. And so I think that it broadens our kind of knowledge. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because every day that goes by, I learn something different. I might learn a new coping technique. And what's really positive about, because, there's a lot of people struggling out there. And I think the one positive that's come from social media is that there are a lot of people struggling. There are a lot of people communicating their struggles. And all it takes sometimes is one person to say one thing, and it might change your whole day. And I've always found that really powerful. Anytime I'm inspired, I write it down, because when depression takes its grip, or when anxiety starts consuming you, you forget everything. You don't have this kind of, oh, right, I've got to do this now. And that's going to reduce. No, it doesn't. For me, it doesn't work like that. For me, I've got to open up my phone, or I've got to open up my journal, and I've got to say, right, okay, I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do this. So I think part of the challenge in reducing one's mental struggles is you need access to like a list, or you need access to ideas that are just going to essentially change your perception to things.
That's really good as well, because as you say, I think when you get in that situation, I think people forget that, or don't appreciate that their brain takes over, and therefore it's that powerhouse. We're going to end up not being able to think straight, or we're going to feel all that anxiety, or that overwhelming feeling of being low, that we just can't take information in. And I think that's the thing. So writing it down is a great idea. It's a great, having that toolbox on paper.
Well, for instance, I see many people who literally don't want to get out of bed. And, if that's the case, then it's a question of, okay, well, why is that? What's going on? So depression is sort of, how I classify it as just a massive feeling of overwhelm. And if you're lying in bed and you're too overwhelmed to face the day or to face your to-do list, what I find is that just being able to just focus on getting out of bed and nothing else. And it's interesting because this is where depression and anxiety meet, because the depression is all about that sense of overwhelm and not being able to face your day. The anxiety is all about the thinking ahead. So they're totally intertwined. And the reason why grounding yourself and to just focus on one thing at a time really works, because if you're just focusing on right now and nothing else, so all I have to do now is get out of bed. Okay, I've done that. And then you focus on the next thing. So that's one example of how, depression, anxiety are under the same kind of umbrella. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. I think I say sometimes, I think it is if all you can do is get out of bed, if all you can do is brush your teeth, if all you can do is wash your face, if all you can do is have some breakfast, if that's all you can do, that's it. That's enough. And I guess we talked earlier about, before we came on air, is that it's on a continuum, depression, isn't it? You can have, I see it as getting up and having feeling a bit blue, a bit down, to all the way through, right to clinical depression. And anyone who's struggling with it can feel any of that along that continuum.
Yeah, I mean, very often there is this misconception that something must have happened to make you feel depressed, or something must, what's making you feel anxious. And for some people, depression is circumstantial. So the things that are going on in your life are fueling your depression, or maybe they've created it. I think in my case, I think mine is a mixture. It's a combination of clinical. So in other words, it's just the way I am.
Yeah.
And it's add to that a series of, events that have happened in my life that have exacerbated it. But there doesn't always have to be a reason. And, I know that people that really suffer, the question they hate getting asked is, how are you? How are you feeling? Because it's just an enormous effort to respond to that. And very often, someone will say, well, I'm actually feeling really low right now. And then the response to that will be, well, why? What's going on? And then they'll say, well, nothing specific. I'm just feeling blue.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to say, well, this is the way it is. This is what I'm feeling. I can't change the thoughts that are coming in. I can't change these feelings, but depression's not a choice, and anxiety is not a choice. What is a choice is what you do. How you spend your day, your lifestyle. All that is choice. And
Can I stop you for a minute? Because I think that was an interesting one. Being asked, how are you? What would you prefer as someone who suffers with depression? Because I think if we know what we need, we're in a better place.
Yes.
It's like, well, how are you? Well, what would you, I sometimes ask people, what do you need right now? They may not know, but that might, that's fine. It doesn't matter if they don't know. But that's me working with a client, as a professional. But what would you prefer, people said?
I think there are two approaches. So some people sometimes I like advice.
Okay.
And other times I just want to be heard.
Okay.
And I think that goes for most people. Sometimes it's judging whether somebody wants, a whole raft of techniques to help them, or whether they just need to vent. And obviously that has to be judged accordingly. But I know for me, that one of the most draining questions is being asked how I am. In fact, a lot of the time I kind of skip over it, because the thing is that to have to explain your depression, to have to go into, the dark cloud and the way it's gripping you, it can be very monotonous and exhausting.
Yeah.
And it's a big effort. So that's why I withdraw a lot, and people with depression withdraw a lot, because it's too monotonous to have to keep talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I the only way I can what came to my mind is it's a physical thing, but I suffer with migraines, and people immediately think it's a bad headache. They make that assumption. And they ask me, have you taken anything? At which point I want to poke their eyes out. And I suffered with them for over 10 years now. And I always say, well, I've tried everything apart from voodoo. And I just think that people they want to try and help, like with depression. They want to help. They want to make us better, whatever it is. But you can't be helped. And I think, as you say, it's judging it. And I think if you're being asked, how are you? Then what can people respond with that? Because it is that, isn't it? If somebody's listening and they struggle with depression and they can't cope with being asked, how are you? How can they answer somebody in a way that, like, leave me alone?
Yeah.
How are they going to do that without too much effort?
Yeah. The thing is, it's what I find is the number one is to have that understanding. If you have that understanding of a person, and for instance, does the person respond well to having suggestions, or do they respond well to just giving them some space to talk about their feelings? I think everyone has to be judged individually. Everyone responds individually. I think for me, my battles, they're so internal. They're not really, yeah, I do talk about my feelings sometimes. I mean, I've been in therapy, pretty much my whole life, on and off. And that has been life-saving, I might add, that without that, it'd be a very different story. So reaching out is absolutely critical.
Is that what you're saying, that reaching out for some help?
100%. And
Right.
but again, reaching out, you've got to be careful who you reach out to. So I see a lot of people who, especially within families, they feel completely unsupported. They feel completely invalidated. They feel totally isolated, because I'll tell you what's very common is that their mental illness struggles are not accepted.
Yeah.
They're not validated by their family members. They are, told that they're drama queens or drama kings, that they're, that everyone has bad days, all that sort of thing. I see it all the time. And that's really tough, because not only are you having to cope with your struggles, but you're having to cope with lack of support.
Yeah.
So what I would say is absolutely reach out, but reach out to people who are going to identify with your struggles. So just be very cautious about who you open up to. Something else very common, and this is amongst teenagers, because teenagers, the numbers are through the roof of teenagers struggling with depression and anxiety. And one big issue for them that I see is that they're confiding in their friends, and a lot of their friends are just, are not being there how they should be there. So again, the person struggling starts to feel just totally on their own.
Or the converse of that, I think, is that they will get around others who are struggling too, and that's not being. It can be supportive, but equally they can pull each other down instead of finding empathetic friends, and understandable with adolescents, because they're going through such huge changes. The brain is changing. The brain is still growing, which I don't think a lot of people understand that. It's growing till your late 20s, early 30s. So parts of the brain just aren't fully developed. And then you've got that hormonal changes added to it. So it's not surprising that youngsters, they're not going to be the best kind of support in a way.
What I find is that different people respond to different strategies. So, somebody, if you say to them, look, can you get out and change your environment, and it just won't appeal to them. It's not something that they're going to do. Whereas someone else, that will really work for them, and that will really resonate with them. So there are so many different coping tools for mental illness, and it's just finding a handful. Again, just doing one thing it might sort of take the edge off, but you need at least a handful of go-to techniques, and you have to find the ones that resonate with you. You have to find the ones that you naturally connect with, or that you could see yourself doing.
And I think that is the point, isn't it? And I think just having that tool chest of different techniques and strategies, whatever they are, and then you could pull them out. Well, I'll give that a try. Well, no, that one doesn't work. Not working today, or that might work tomorrow. We don't know, as you say, because thought of going out on one particular day, oh no way, and yet on another day there might just be something, whether a friend connected, or whether the sun's shining, or whatever that thing is, just might make you think, I could try that today.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's like, one of my favorite tools is journaling. I love to journal. And many, many reasons why it works. But there are people that don't take to journaling. You know, I had somebody say to me the other day, you know, I'm not feeling anything. So how am I supposed to write? What am I supposed to write? I'm not actually feeling anything. So, you know, again, it's just finding the right strategy for that person. And fortunately, again, you know, I mean, it's taken me a lifetime to discover different things. But the beauty, as I say, of social media now is that those things can be communicated for free. You know, it's all out there. And obviously, you know, mental illness is mental illness, and that's not going away. But thank God there are things you can do.
Yeah, yeah, very true. There are great websites, aren't there? I mean, Mind is one of them. I think
Yes.
the NHS has put out some really good resources as well. So I think find the right one. Don't just find somebody who calls himself an expert or get into a group of people that pull you down. I mean, support groups, I think there must be quite a few. I've not searched that, but I think there must be quite a few that deal with on Facebook, for example, but it's finding the right one, because you can find some support groups that just pull you down instead of feeling I'm not alone. Because I think that is the thing, isn't it? It's only me, I'm alone and no one understands. And I think that can be really quite reassuring, can't it? But I think it is just finding the right resources, and not just somebody who claims that they know things and they don't have that real expertise. So search out your expert or your professional. Yeah,
there's a couple of things there. I mean, firstly, I totally agree that support groups can be, you know, can sort of add to your feelings of depression or anxiety. At the same time, you know, if you are feeling invalidated and you're feeling unsupported and you're feeling isolated, it is one way of just, you know, I mean, just by simply hearing someone's story can create such a healing effect within you. Because as you're hearing that story being recalled, you're just thinking, this is me, you know, and that eliminates that kind of feeling of isolation. But I totally agree with you in what you know, you do have to kind of, you know, you don't want to make that your only focus, you know, just sort of join support groups. No, absolutely not. I would say that trying to find something that just makes you feel good, that just makes you smile, you know, even if it's just a sunset or sound of the rain, anything that, you know, can just give you a bit of relief, even if it's for 5 minutes. I often, you know, suggest just getting a piece of paper and just writing down everything that either makes you feel good or makes you smile, or you know, if you had if you had the freedom, all the freedom in the world, you know, what would you do, and all that kind of thing. When you start getting in touch with things that you enjoy and things that sort of you feel would add to your life, that's when ideas are created. Because the most common theme amongst people who struggle with mental struggles is a lack of purpose and a lack of passion. It's the most, you know, common thing I hear. And but again, it's a kind of it's a catch-22, because, you know, if you're in a depression, then you know, to feel passionate about something, it's going to be a real uphill struggle. But it's realizing that actually, if you can just force yourself to do X, Y, and Z and try and find that whatever it is that's going to add to your life, you'll find that the depression will ease. It's not going to go away completely, but so you need to find that kind of that resilience.
Yeah, it's so debilitating, isn't it? I'm recalling I've had one bout of depression that lasted about 6 months. So I'm very fortunate that I haven't got a lifelong, not chronic, but situation for me. But I can recall that it was hard to get out of bed, but I managed to get to work. I was working part-time. I managed to get through that. It was about the only thing that sustained me, really. I have to go to work. But after just a few hours, when I got back, I was absolutely, completely, exhausted.
Yeah.
I was shattered. I couldn't think any more than that. I just lay on the sofa and that was it. But I knew I couldn't do anything at all. I wanted to, but then I remember being so awful to my husband because he would do things, but I felt he wasn't doing it the right way either. So it manifested itself with me being irritable and very critical of him. Poor guy, he must have been absolutely distraught. But I just bringing that out because I think just noticing how it affected me in that way. I mean, fortunate, I took some antidepressants for a while, that helped. And again, I think medication can help, but again, you've got to test the different things. You know, clients, some will work for one and they won't for another, and it can help lift the mood.
Yes.
But again, it's something you've got to figure out with your GP, I think, very much so. And if you don't want to take medication, then that's fine as well. You know, I would say, well, just go and talk to your GP. You don't have to. You don't have to take the medication. But for me, it did help. But just that sense, it was coming back to me as we were talking, how it just emotionally and physically draining. It wasn't just feeling low. It was dragging myself around.
Depression, you know, is, even though, well, they say, you know, it's in the brain. It's not. It's you know, it affects your body to such an extent where if one is having a really, really bad day with it, you're completely depleted of energy. Completely. So, and that is why that, you know, physical strategies, practical strategies, which involve movement, which involve some sort of movement, aren't always the go-to. But fortunately, there are a lot of cognitive exercises you can do which don't require that physical exertion. But yeah, I mean, you know, the depression, you know, very often people will say, you know, I'm exhausted and I have no energy, and that's depression.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people just don't realize how much, you know, the mind and the body are connected. We can't separate them. You just can't. And I think people don't get it. I'm often talking about it, but yeah. And that's why I suppose I just wanted to give listeners that little kind of example of what I went through. But I was also fearful for very many years after that of actually having another bout of it, because the only way I could describe it was that it was like sitting on the edge of a well, this deep black hole, and if I just moved in the wrong direction, I would go down there and never come back out.
That's a very, very good description. I mean, you know, the thing is that when you have severe depression, it requires you to be really brave. You know, you have to be really, really brave, because to get through the days when you're struggling with depression, it's hard. I mean, it's a real battle. There's people out there that are really struggling, but you know, what I would say is that the good news is that there are things that can help, and you know, I'm living proof of that. I would not be here today if I didn't have the strategies I have. But I think it's having that awareness. If you're not aware that there are things that are going to reduce it, then I think that's half the battle. Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Right. And that couldn't be more prevalent with depression and anxiety. It really couldn't. When you have the knowledge about how to reduce it, and I always say reduce, because if even if you can reduce your depression or anxiety by 25%, that's massive, absolutely massive. And it doesn't sound a lot, but it's the difference between lying in bed and getting on with your day. So it's huge. And there are a raft of things you can do. My heart goes out to people. It really does, because when you're experiencing it yourself, you just feel it. You feel other people's pain. You can just totally identify with it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. So, what is one thing you would suggest that people could take away with them? What is one thing that someone could put into action right this minute?
Well, the thing about being overwhelmed with depression or anxiety is that all the focus is on you. All the focus is on your depression and your anxiety. And for me, one of the top ways through that is to create some space just for those thoughts that are going on in your head, or just that total feeling of overwhelm. And for me, just change your environment. Just, if you can, get out the house. If you can get out in nature, that's really the go-to for me. Just being around nature, because being around nature not only has this tremendous calming effect on your brain, and it's physiologically evident. When you stand in front of a river or a waterfall or a lake, you can actually feel your brain calming. I mean, it's really it's fascinating. But just if that's not possible, if you're just able to get out, what you're doing is you're just giving yourself a bit of a break. You're just allowing yourself to just breathe for a few minutes, because very often, when we're struggling, we're sitting on our lounge, we're lying on our bed, we're sitting on a computer desk, and just all we have are those depressive thoughts. All we have are those anxious thoughts. They've got nowhere to go.
No, you're surrounded by it constantly because there's nothing else is there. Yeah, that's really good. I think thank you for that. Yeah.
Walk through trees or a forest if you can, but if not, just change your environment.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think we could talk a lot more today, but I think we've only just really touched the surface. But I think if we can just help one person understand, that they're not going mad, that there is help out there. They're not alone. I think that is the one thing. It's just me, and there must be something really wrong with me. And when you get those comments around you, pull yourself together, or stop acting out, as you say, don't be such a drama queen, king, then that makes us feel there's something really wrong with us, and that we are, and that leads to more isolation. So yeah, I think knowing that you're not alone, and knowing that there are coping strategies, I think hopefully that's helped people today. So thank you so much, David.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. So I'm going to put all the details in the show notes. I'll also put links in to the Mind website and the NHS website, I think, because I think there are lots of resources there. And I know I'm going to put all your details in, and I'm sure you've got lots of things that you can help people with. But what is the easiest way for listeners to get in touch with you?
So the easiest way would be through my website, which is healyourgrief.co.uk. Everything's there, and you can contact me for a free chat for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just to see if I can help. Everything's there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Wendy.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'd love to hear from you and what you think, so do get in touch. If you'd like to learn more about me, how I help people who are struggling with issues relating to their personal life or relationships, as well as finding out how you can work with me, go to my website www.wendykatewell.co.uk, where you can find my contact details and book a free call with me. You really don't have to struggle alone. Until next time, take care. Bye.